Thank you, Keir. Look, I welcome the opportunity to contribute to the debate today on the health practitioner bill. And while I think this bill might be given a guarded welcome, and I would give it a guarded welcome myself, because I do believe that the provision of universal health care rather than universal health insurance is something that the government should be striving to achieve and striving to deliver. There has been a lot of debate, and I think when you look at it in context of what has gone on over the last number of, I would say, a year and a half around medical cards, but it seems to have only hit the government with a bombshell as they went out canvassing in the last local elections and realised that this actually was a very serious issue for very many people right across the country. And we've seen some of the publicity in relation to it, and it shows really what the value is of actually raising issues in this House and of raising concerns about how systems are operating within this House, that it falls on deaf ears, because this problem within the medical card system, the problems within the discretionary medical card system, the removal of cards to seriously ill children, the removal of cards from children who have serious disabilities and life-limiting disabilities, has been raised in this House continuously over the last year and a half, and the government has not listened. And it's only when the government went out and started knocking on doors that they realised the extent of the issue and the extent of the anger that was out there. So perhaps if this government actually listened to what goes on in the House and took note of what goes on in this House, you might not have received such a shock over the last couple of weeks to realise the importance of the issues out there. When you see families who have children under 6 and over 6 who are in dire need of their medical cards and need to be dealt with, where the cards have been refused, where the cards have been withdrawn, where they have to go and jump through huge hoops to get cards restored, it shows that the system doesn't really care about them, and the system is about saving money, and the system is about saving money as the government has laid out in the budget. I'm talking to the HSE. I have asked them if they would not consider the fact that when people applying for medical cards for children, that they know that they're over the limit. They know that in terms of means that they exceed the income boundaries for it. But yet, and they are looking for them in medical need. But yet PCRS will go through the whole ropes of assessing income and ask for more and more information and delay the system and delay the decision making, delay the actual referral to whether there's a medical need, by forcing people to drag up more and more financial information when they know from the start, and have indicated from the start, that they know financially they won't qualify and they need to get a card assessed under medical means and medical grounds and medical hardship grounds. And I think, Minister, if you were going to do something to actually change the system and make it more responsive, that is something that I believe could be done very easily, where if when an application comes in, rather than starting the assessment on means, if you assess it on means and medical grounds at the initial stages, so that if somebody has a medical need, you don't need to go through the whole process of the means test, and you can just actually award the card there. But the problem with that system is that's going from the premise that you actually want to award a card in the first place, and that's the problem with the system, is that the system is dealt with in such a way and being dealt with in such a way to stop people accessing it and to stop people getting what their entitlements are. And I fully believe that the reason for this has been done is because a certain amount of people will go away. A certain amount of people won't use the full appeal system, won't use the review system, and won't have the heart or the ability to be able to actually battle the system to actually achieve what they're entitled to, what they should be entitled to in the first place. I think the PCRS over the last number of months seem to have learned from the Department of Social Protection and how they deal with medical cards, where we see now when the applications are submitted for medical cards, there is a commitment from PCRS that they'll be dealt with within 15 working days. They're not actually registered on the system for maybe 9 or 10 days after they're received, so the 15 working days doesn't start until they're actually registered on the system. I've had many cases of applications submitted, been acknowledged to my office that they've been received by PCRS, and 2 weeks later still haven't been registered on the system, as actually haven't been received. And when we bring it up with them, they say, oh, we haven't got it. But we have an email here confirming receipt of it. Oh yeah, it hasn't been registered on the system. So it's about delay, it's about putting people off, it's about trying to make sure that people go away and that they don't participate and don't get the full way through the system and receive their medical cards. In relation to the bill itself, I welcome the fact that the Minister has indicated this morning or today that there has been a framework agreement reached with the IMO on talks, or about how they're going to talk about the talks, or how they're going to work around it and see what they're actually going to talk about. And that is welcome. But I think there is a number of issues in the contract and the proposed contract that need to be highlighted, and it has been highlighted by other speakers here today in relation to the gagging clause, where the GP will not be able to say anything that brings the HSE into disrepute or anything against the HSE. And I think that has to go straight away, because it's madness, and it should not be there at all, because GPs have to be able to talk about the health service and how the health services is operating in order to be able to bring information to the fore and to ensure that we can identify changes that need to take place. And also included in the framework agreements as well is this idea of health checks and regular health monitoring of the population, which I understand has been in the contracts in the UK for a number of years, and has actually been looked at to be taken out of the contracts now, because it has been shown to not actually be of any real value and not actually work. There's no doubt that the provision of free GP care to under sixes will lead to extra visits. And I think the Growing Up in Ireland report shows that they estimate that there will be an increase of 0.6 visits per child if they receive free medical treatment and free GP visits. But I think a lot has been made of it, and it's a bit overstated. And I'm also almost very worried when I hear the IMO talking about the fact, if we look at medical card patients, that they visit the doctor a lot more frequently than private patients and patients who are well. And there's very good reasons for that. The reasons are that it's because people who have medical cards generally are less well off. They generally are ill and sick, so they need to visit the doctor more often and more frequently. So I think the amount of extra visits may not actually be as high as what has been indicated by some of the medical organisations, but there is no doubt that there will be increased visits. I myself had 3 children under the age of 5, and we felt like that for those years that we were visiting the doctor every turnaround. And so I know that there's many families out there waiting to get this implemented, so that they can be rest assured that if their children need to visit the doctor, that they actually will be able to go and can afford to go. And it is true that as children get older, maybe get down to 6 or 7, the frequency that they have to go to the doctor declines significantly, because you're not as prone to chest infections and throat infections and ear infections and everything else that goes along with young children and toddlers. Now, the one concern I would have in relation to the legislation, and the Minister has said it in his speech, is that access to medical cards will not be restricted. And you say that it won't be restricted for children under the age of 5. But the evidence of what we see that's going on at the moment within the medical card system makes a lie out of that. And I believe, and I hope that it doesn't happen, but I believe that the medical card system will use the fact that children under 5 have free GP visits as a way of restricting access to medical cards for those children. And we're going to be here, after we see the rollout of this, and we're going to be here in a year's time talking about and bringing up instances of children who are covered by the under 6s legislation, but who can't access medical cards because it's been used against them. And the fact that they get the free GP visits will be used against them and their families in restricting their access to medical cards. And I hope that won't happen, but I think it will happen, and it's because all the evidence shows that in the way that medical cards have been dealt with at the moment, that will be used as a way to restrict access and to make sure that children who are ill and who need additional supports and care can actually get them. There has been talk, and I think you mentioned it yourself, Minister, and I know it's probably dealt with under the framework agreement and the talks about that there may be some sort of limitation on the number of visits that somebody under 6 will be entitled to under this scheme in this system. I hope that doesn't rear its head again, because it makes a mockery of the whole system if that's the case. And when we look at the probity reviews that were brought in this year, will we see in upcoming budgets that the same sort of probity reviews will be carried out to limit the number of actual visits that children under 6 can make to their GP under this scheme? One other thing that I see in the legislation that actually worries me a wee bit is this idea that in order to qualify under this scheme, you have to be ordinarily resident in the state for at least 1 year. I have a lot of experience of dealing with habitual residence conditions within within social protection, and it is a system that is used again to restrict access and to make sure that people who have a genuine need and have a genuine need for payments cannot get them. Being refused on habitual residence conditions, being refused without any regard to the actual conditions to qualify, where it's laid out what people need to be able to show that they qualify under this residency condition, and the Department of Social Protection just ignores them and refuses people. Again, in the hope and in the view that a certain number of those people will go away and won't continue to fight through the system.